Welcome to NCBA's Cattleman's Call podcast with host Lane Nordland.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cattleman's Call podcast. Lane Nordland joining you here today, and I'm excited about our conversation here today with a New York cattle producer with the Watkins Glen Farms operation. Mr. Brett Chedzoy joins us here today, and Brett, as we gather here today, it's a little cold up in Montana. It was about 5 degrees. We're having this conversation, a little warmer climate down in San Antonio today. But what was the weather like up in New York before you headed south here today?
You only have to wait 24 hours for the weather to change up our way. This week we're going to be on a roller coaster, and today it was in the 40s. Tomorrow it's back in the 20s, and then it's going to go up and down like that all week. We've had a very normal January for once, though, where it was mostly in the 20s by day and teens by night, and we like that kind of weather, and the cows do too.
Yeah. Well, it's been weird up in Montana. Started off pretty cold, below freezing point, and then this week it was 55 degrees. A lot of snow melted off, a lot of ice, and then plummeted the day, of course, I headed out of state, to leave my wife at home, take care of everything. That's usually how it goes for me.
You can always count on travel to bring weather that you would ideally not like to see.
Well, that's I'm glad I got a strong wife back at home while I'm out here playing, I guess. My father-in-law would say I'm playing down here.
Yeah. Well, we brought my parents along with us, and I have Maria along here with me too, so nobody can criticize me back home.
We are actually having this taping in front of a live studio audience today. Your lovely wife,
one.
Maria, joining us. We're in this big conference room in San Antonio, but I should mention that Brett and his family's operation, Watkins Glen Farms, was actually recognized as the Region I National Environmental Stewardship Award winner for 2024. So congratulations to you on that recognition, and I look forward to talking about the operation and whatnot here today, but I do want to give a shout out to those magnificent sponsors of the ESAP program, USDA's NRCS, Corteva, and the National Cattlemen's Foundation, who continue to support this outstanding program. And I just love the ESAP program because I think in agriculture, Brett, we get too honed in on our own what's going on in our own neck of the woods. And I'm from Montana. We talk a lot about things, drought, size of the cattle herd, issues that are going on up in Canada, endangered species, which are bears, grizzly bears for us. And you talk to folks in Florida or Hawaii or New Mexico that maybe have some of the same challenges, but maybe not a grizzly bear in their backyard, but it could be as big of a problem as grizzly bears, depending on the impact that regulations or sustainability could have on an operation. But I could keep blabbering, but I'm really excited, I guess, what it's been like meeting other people through this ESAP program and seeing all these outstanding operations and looking at all the work they put into it.
Well, it's very humbling for us to be part of this group. We don't feel like what we do deserves any more special recognition than what any other farmer or rancher's doing out there. Our family comes from a long line of farmers, different parts of the country, and yet we're really the first beef cattle farmers in many generations. In fact, my grandpa Chedzoy immigrated to the U.S. as a young man many years ago from South Wales, where our family were sheep herders. And so it's kind of funny now to think that we're dealing with the big grass munchers and not the little grass munchers. But we look forward to getting to know more of the other folks involved in ESAP, because I think it's really neat that there's regional winners, because it highlights all the good work that's happening all around the country, not just in, say, one part of the country.
Now, for a little bit of background for our audience, you have a cow-calf operation up in New York in Watkins Glen. What part of the state is that in, and what's the landscape like? What does the grazing look like, and what's it like raising cattle in that part of the nation?
Sure. We think that we're kind of in God's country for raising cattle. Watkins Glen is over in southwestern New York. We're about 3 hours away from Niagara Falls, which is a landmark that pretty much everybody knows. And we feel like we're maybe not quite far enough away from New York City, which is about 5 to 6 hour drive, depending on traffic and just where you're going. But it's a very, very beautiful part of rural upstate New York. Anybody that's been to New York before realizes that you have New York City and then you have New York. Mm-hmm. And anybody from outside of the city always says they're from upstate New York. Mm-hmm. And we're very proud to be from upstate New York. It's rolling, even somewhat rugged country that there's deep glacial lakes there and largely covered with forests. So a lot of our grazing is in what we call silvopastures, where we're thinning out the woods in a way that we're still growing all our best timber, our best trees, but we're getting rid of the invasive brush and the firewood quality trees to grow productive forages instead. And our cattle love it. I know many other people listening probably come from areas where heat stress is a tremendous concern, but we still have a lot of really hot, really humid weather in upstate New York. And if you watch the cows any day that's sunny and over 70, they're actively seeking out shade. Mm-hmm. So we always try to make sure that they have some shade in their pastures. And we're fortunate because we live in a part of the country where we do get quite a bit of rain, sometimes too much rain. Feels like
what's annual precip there?
It rains about 40 inches a year, but wow. we have almost 6 months of winter, yeah. And once winter sets in, it usually stays there. And so typically we're grazing until about mid-December. At that point, we're usually covered up with some frozen, wet, heavy snow that turns into concrete, really presses our cool season grasses down, and it's usually by mid-April that we can be fully out grazing again. So we're stocking and managing to try to graze 8 months a year, and then we do what we call bale grazing, where we're rotationally grazing the cows around many paddocks. We have about 100 paddocks across 500 acres in our grazing system. And so if you go to our farm this time of the year, the cows are still out there moving around. They're just eating round bales.
So do you put up the round bales yourself, or do you buy it from a local operation? Yep. I guess what's the protein on those in grass? What type of bales are you feeding?
Sure. So we make our own hay reluctantly. We do it not because we feel like we're necessarily saving any money, but it's quality control and quantity control. So we'll feed somewhere around 1,200 large rounds, 1,000-pound large rounds this winter to our herd. And reliably, we could buy maybe a third to a half of that on the market. Mm-hmm. So it's not a good feeling going into winter not knowing where your hay's coming from or how good the hay's going to be, because it rains a lot in the Northeast. We never know if it's going to be a year that's good for making good hay or for making poor quality, washed out, musty hay. So the making our own hay gives us some control over the quality of that. And it also helps us so we lease about 500 acres to make our own hay. And that's important to us because we live in an area where we're boxed in on all sides by large dairy operations and large row crop operations. And it's nice to see that kind of farming going on in our landscape too. But any land that we don't use for hay production is lost to hay production.
Mm-hmm. And so when you're utilizing those 100 paddocks in that 500 acres, when do you place the bales out? And are they wrapped or is it twine? I'm intrigued by this aspect of it as a person that has grown up, and you feed with the bale pickup and you roll it out, or you put in the feeder for the heifers in the pen. Paint a picture for us on how the planning goes into that, and then the transfer around those paddocks.
When I see bale pickups, I laugh because I was like, we'd be out there all day putting bales out with a bale pickup. And A lot of times we can't count on frozen ground conditions. This has been a pretty normal winter for us so far where it is frozen up, and I think that's an advantage for us. It's certainly an advantage for the winter bale grazing months, but as we start to graze off the fall stockpiles, we can usually count on drier, better ground conditions maybe into mid to late November. So as soon as the stockpiles are starting to dwindle, we'll be trying to put bales out as the herd moves out of each paddock. And we can lay typically weeks, sometimes months of hay out at a time. And again, because we have 100 different paddocks, and we might only use half to 2/3 of those in a typical winter, we have a lot of options to move animals in different directions just based on the 10-day forecast. If it's going to be extreme, if we get a polar vortex, we can move them towards areas where we have some spruce pine, what we call our living barns, and the animals are much happier riding out a couple ugly days in those types of areas. They don't like being locked in the barnyard areas. We have 2 beautiful dairy barns on the farm, and they're completely worthless for putting a herd of our size. We have about 120 brood cows, plus we overwinter the calves and sell them as yearling stockers. So we will opportunistically set bales out all winter long, but as we start to approach March and April, we start taking a look at, all right, we can expect a lot of mud conditions here, so we're going to put bales in some of the well-drained gravel moraines and areas where we're going to have maybe a little less impact if we have multiple days of soft soils and heavy rainfall. But it's, the cows can move themselves wherever we need them to move. And just before flying out here today to San Antonio, yesterday we got the herd moved into a good spot where they can take care of themselves for a few days as we're down here enjoying the company of other cattle people from all over.
Well, what kind of cattle are you running?
We run predominantly what we think of as Aberdeen Angus. These are older bloodline. We jokingly refer to them as our grass-bred cows. They're probably a little shorter and stockier than what many people would be accustomed to seeing, but we've been building this herd up for almost 25 years now, really seeking to create kind of the perfect grazing animal that can make high-quality grass-fed beef. We're a grass-fed operation, not for any particular philosophy other than to keep it simple for us. Maria and I both work full-time jobs. I'm a regional extension forester for Cornell University. Maria teaches at the local school, so we don't have time to be out there taking concentrates and grain and other special stuff. And if you got the right cow and feed them good hay, they don't need it, in my opinion, either.
So what put you on this path? As you mentioned before, your family has been in different parts of agriculture and also different parts of the U.S. Did you grow up in this region of New York, and is this multi-generational? And again, I know you mentioned your grandfather there in Wales raising sheep, but what led you on the beef end? Because I know that's predominantly dairy country up there. Am I correct? Not a lot of beef cattle?
Yeah, we're big dairy country because we do have a lot of rainfall, so we can grow a lot of forages in a short period of time and do it without irrigation. You don't see irrigation anywhere. When I go visit the Kansas wheat farmer cousins, it's irrigation everywhere today. So Maria is from a large farming family in central Argentina, and that's where we met in the early 90s. We just celebrated our 30th anniversary, and when we got married, we bought a ranch near her family's farm and slowly started to plant trees there and build a herd there. And then when we moved back to the old family dairy farm in the Watkins Glen area in 2001, our children were 1, 2, and 3 at the time, and took a look around, realized we weren't going to be dairy farmers anymore, weren't going to be row crop farmers. Our neighbors are big fruit growers, and they'd be the first to tell you only crazy people grow fruit. And every year as we see them fighting the hail and the late freezes and pest outbreaks, I can understand that. So we felt that, I mean, the grazing really just started as something to do with the children and have fun and use the land productively, and it grew into what it is today, where we're farming about 1,000 acres, and half of that is our pasture for our grazing, and half of it is for the hay production, and keeps us out of trouble. We have a lot of fun. Yesterday we were doing preg checks on 30-some heifers, and our oldest son came with the two grandsons to help. And of course, we have other great friends that always come give us a hand for something special like that. My parents, they're both in their 80s, are still very active around the farm. My dad, Jim, is 84. His favorite thing in the world next to golf is raking hay, and he's pretty much given up the golf because he just likes doing the hay work. And we're blessed to have him. You'd like to think we'd have him forever, but we're already thinking about the next steps when Dad doesn't feel like spending long days on the tractor anymore.
Yeah. So do your kids want to come back and be involved and have the grandkids be there too? What's the talk around the family kitchen table?
Well, so it's been something that's slowly been sinking into our mind for many years now, but we like to say that our goal is to keep it fun and worthwhile for the next generation. And I think that's our most daunting challenge. It sounds easy to say, it's much more difficult to do. Now that we have our children and their children, our kids grew up very involved in the farm, liked the farming, but have set off on other careers in their mid-20s. The youngest two are in the military. Our youngest son, Joe, graduated from West Point a year and a half ago. He's stationed over in Europe now with the Army. Our middle kid, Clara, she's in the Air Force. She's a lieutenant in the Air Force, currently stationed in Florida with her husband. And our oldest, Ian, he's the one that lives relatively nearby with two grandsons. He's a ceramic engineer at Corning Inc. And he, sometimes he says it with almost a little bit of reluctance, but Ian says, yeah, I know I'm going to be the one that takes over the farm, but one time he told me, I only want to have 20 cows. And I said, well, that's good. You know what you want to have. And I said, you're probably going to realize you need somewhere between 20 and 120 cows to keep it worthwhile and pay the bills. But I'm glad that he's thinking about it.
Well, it's always great, though, to have family around, and because that's the best thing I think about it is sometimes it's not fun to work with family, but at the end of the day, you learn a lot, you grow a lot, and mentioning that your wife Maria is from Argentina as well. I've got to travel down there on some ag trade missions with the Angus Association as well, and I got to see one of the coolest. They just had opened the new livestock market in Canuelas, I believe, and it used to be downtown in Buenos Aires near Palermo. Well, they had just moved it out, and I think they were running 3,000 head through, and the capacity was going to be 10, 12,000, state of the art, but it was all on you'd walk the catwalks, and it was all stainless steel and top of the line, and I could not believe how fast they could sell cattle. They just go pin to pin, and those buyers would buy those cattle, and then they weighed them. Yep. I enjoyed that and getting travel. We were northern up near the Uruguayan border as well, so it was great seeing that country and seeing the parrots. I did not know the parrots were just everywhere up there.
Yeah,
they were a nuisance.
The green parrots, parakeets. Yeah, they'll wake you up bright and early in the morning too.
But let's get back to, I guess, when you're looking at, I know you mentioned your work in extension as well. How was your work in extension and continuing to look for resources to become a better operator, to graze better, to raise better cattle? And as you said, you're actually using those older genetics as well. How has your role in extension helped you keep an open mind and looking at different ways of just being efficient, and maybe that might lead into the environmental stewardship conversation as well?
When this position that I've held for almost 20 years now, the regional extension forestry position opened up, I was humming and hawing about whether I really wanted to do extension work. And to be honest, I didn't know a lot about what extension did. And Maria looked at me one day and goes, like, you spend all day long talking to people about their woods and their trees and their cows and grazing. You might as well do it and get paid for it. And as usual, she was right. So I feel like I have just an amazing job that not only meshes very well with what our personal interests are and the farming side of what we do, but it also allows me and Maria as well to meet so many other amazing farmers that, and I think farmers at the end of the day learn best from each other. And so even though a lot of my work is forestry focused, we've shifted heavily over the past 10 years into what we call agroforestry, which I think ties it all together for a lot of people. And agroforestry people in particular are just very outward thinking, longer term thinking. I always joke that foresters want everything to happen in 50 years and farmers want it to happen in 5 months. In agroforestry, it's somewhere in the middle. We get to travel around quite a bit and take in a lot of other perspectives and good ideas and bring a lot of that stuff home with us, but also share what we're doing. And I always feel that at the end of the day, if I can help somebody jump a little bit further ahead on either our learning curve or somebody else's learning curve, that's like the most important thing I can do to help other farmers.
What when we're looking, and again, I always people listening probably just shaking their head. I always talks about Montana, but that's what I've grown up around. When I think of forest, I'm thinking of pine trees and firs and the evergreens and whatnot, and the few deciduous that are out there too. What are the forests like in your region? Is it state land? Is it national forest land? What are the scales of this? And maybe how does that impact not only your operation but the dairies and the row crops around there? How do forestry, and I like how you phrase that, agroforestry as well, because a lot of people don't realize that forestry is agriculture. But how do they all intertwine, and how dependent are they on it, and what are some pros and cons that come along with forestry as well?
Yeah, so throughout much of the Northeast, but certainly in upstate New York, you can't really talk about agriculture without talking about the forest as well, because our state is 2/3 covered with forests, and that's pretty typical of many of the eastern states. And so New York statistically has about 19 million acres. Over 75% of that is privately owned. That's a lot of small private woodland owners with a lot of different objectives and a lot of different things happening on their properties. And so for us, though, the agroforestry and the silvopasturing, it's a way to use all of our land in a way that's not only productive, but we feel environmentally responsible. Silvopasturing is something very different than our long history of woodland grazing, where it's just basically throw the cows in the woods and feed them if they ran out of something to eat in there. We call it feedlot with trees, and that's not good for our farm woodlands. The southern tier of New York and northern tier of Pennsylvania have a world-class hardwood resource. We have the world's most valuable hardwood forests on a dollar value per acre basis. I worked for quite a few years in international forestry, and it really took that experience to drive that home for me. We have a $25 billion forest industry in upstate New York, and
Wow.
3/4 of the timber that's harvested is directly exported overseas, either as lumber or logs. So we don't want to mess that up. But the animals have become our workforce to do a better job managing our woods, because a lot of our farm woodlands today are very impacted from different exotic pests like emerald ash borer. Every time you turn around, though, we have a new bad bug. And deer browsing has really limited the ability for the oak and maple and other valuable species like black cherry to regenerate on their own. So we see silvopasturing as an opportunity to clear out the invasive understories in our woods, restore it to a more healthy state, and then we can use good forest management to at some point regenerate the forest for the next 100 years.
So when you talk about silvopastures, can you walk us through what that looks like and when that philosophy came about, and what it's like using it yourself?
I was first exposed to silvopasturing in the early 90s in Argentina. Argentine ranchers are very pragmatic, so I had the good fortune to work with large ranching operations in the Sierra Mountains and other parts of central Argentina that for them it was like, well, why wouldn't we do this? The Argentines like to joke that God gave them great rain and soil and climate for growing trees, but forgot to put the trees there. So these ranchers saw it as their mission to create a vast forest from scratch. And when I showed up there in the early 90s, fresh out of grad school, I had a harvesting and utilization background. So my job was to teach the gauchos how to be loggers, and I was very unsuccessful at doing that because
I can imagine.
they realized that it was more fun to punch cattle from
Yeah.
horseback than logging was hard work. But I obviously learned a lot of the experience, and so that just gave me that comfort level to move beyond the paradigm here of don't put cows in the woods. And there was great reasons for why we started pushing that in the 40s and 50s, where early foresters and conservationists realized that we were basically overgrazing our high-value woodlands to death. And it was a slow, insidious process that you really had to be out there observing it over a longer term to realize what was going on. Mm-hmm. So silvopasturing is very different, though, in the sense that it's intensive rotational grazing, and that's really how you eliminate or minimize any of the negatives of having kind of a constant, passively managed livestock presence in woods. And common sense, of course, weighs into all of this. You don't put the cows in there as the frost is coming out of the ground and the soils are quicksand, or maybe the sap is running in the maple trees and their animals are going to want to chew the bark off the trees. But silvopasturing happens in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different good ways, on a lot of different farms. And that's what keeps it fun, I think, is that people are always finding out better ways to do it and then showing others how to do this. But what it boils down to for us is it allows us to use our all of the land that's available to us, and a lot of marginally and underutilized land in our area, to anything that hasn't been actively farmed in the last few decades in our area basically is growing back to invasive brush. And that's it's poor habitat. It's something that doesn't really have a future. It's not helping us with food security or farm viability. So we love silvopasturing in the Northeast, but we got a long ways to go, and there's always more producers that are really showing the way. And I'm going to retire in not too many years from extension. It doesn't mean I'm going to go away and stop talking to people. I would like to focus more on the farm, and as well as our ranch in Argentina that we still have after 30-some years, and grandkids and all that good stuff. But I really like seeing that there's a lot of new faces coming into what we're doing there with the agroforestry and the silvopasturing and just the forestry and, good farming in general. And I think those are really the examples that are going to help lead a whole new generation forward.
So can you take a stick horseback and pick up a hot wire like those gauchos do down in Argentina and ride underneath it?
I have a real phobia of hot fences, and it's somebody told me once that the bigger an animal's heart is, the more they feel the pain from an electric shock, and that must be why I don't like electric fences.
Do you use electric fence on the poist then?
We're in Argentina. We have some electrified fence, but it's what they call suspended fences with a varillas, and in New York, it's all electrified high tensile fence.
Yep. Have you explored or looked at any of the new technology around the collars that a lot of I know some folks up in Montana that have been experimenting? Has that kind of been on your horizon? The electrified dog collars for cattle?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by all the new technology, even though I think sometimes we're almost the anti-technology farm. But last week before a big trip to present at a conference, my cell phone broke, and you don't realize how dependent or important some little device is like that just to go travel. So I think that the way we're doing things today is going to be different than the way we're going to be doing it 10 years from now, and maybe the cows will be walking around with little GPS collars and staying in their lane, so to speak. But one thing I didn't mention earlier about our farm is that the original Grand Prix course of the United States, so Watkins Glen is known for, amongst other things, there's a large NASCAR road circuit there, Watkins Glen International, but it's where the original road racing and later Formula One started racing in the late 40s and 50s. So the original Grand Prix course runs through the middle of our farm. We also have almost a mile and a half of boundary on the Watkins Glen State Park Gorge, which is New York's second most visited park after Niagara Falls. So we get about 2 million people coming through our little rural community every summer, and I don't know, there's a sleep well at night factor here involved. So our road, despite all those visitors that come to take in the natural beauty, it's still pretty quiet most of the time, but cows heading down into the gorge, especially on NASCAR weekend, I like having a hard fence around our pasture still.
Oh, yeah. So talking about just people coming in there and population, obviously you're an extension, you're out there, you're educating, but with your producer cap on, how does how you raise cattle and how you take care of your land, how does that go hand in hand with an opportunity to reach nearly 2 million people that are driving down your road and seeing Aberdeen Angus cattle out there? What has that been like, and what is maybe some of the outreach that you and your family have done?
I think it's a blessing and a curse to have so many people come through our area. And it used to feel like it was just a few months in the summer. Now it feels like it's more year-round, although nobody seems to want to come and walk the park here over the last few weeks where we've had like sub-zero wind chills. But even though it's probably not the highest impact group that sees what we're doing, all those people driving down the road, I think it helps them understand the importance of keeping viable farms on the landscape. And I'm always quick to point out to my friends who are like our county economic development people and our county planners and the county legislators that there's, at the end of the day, a single reason why so many people come to our small upstate county. It's because they like what they see in terms of the natural beauty and the agrarian landscapes, and that's what really drives our everything else in our community. And it's really the foundation for our quality of life in our community. And we've been pretty lucky in that we've been fairly sheltered from the development forces that seem to be in high gear everywhere else in the past couple decades. But it's changing because, there aren't too many unspoiled corners of the Northeast still where people can come up and basically have cows to look at every day out their front or back window. And that's what we still have. And our family is committed to trying to keep it that way for forever. I mean, forever is a long time, but for generations to come. But again, you got to keep it fun, and you got to keep a sense of being worthwhile for that to happen.
So obviously this recognition as the Region I ESAP winner is a great honor, and I know you mentioned at the beginning you're just doing what you do. But how can you take this recognition to help inspire the next generation of producers right down the road from you, or in New York in general, or across that region for NCBA? How can this be a spark of keep doing what you're doing? It's hard work, but keep taking care of the land, do your best, and raise good cattle as well. What do you hope somebody can take away from just learning more about your operation?
We try not to intentionally bring a lot of attention to ourselves because, again, I don't want anybody to think like, they're some special farmer and I can't be a special farmer too. And there's so many other great farmers in our area. We think of ourselves as grazers, and first and foremost we are grazers. Any beef cattle people, sheep and goat people, we're always thinking about how we can use the animals to create positive impacts and really minimize the negative impacts, and we do that through grazing, keeping the animals moving around. But any time that there seems to be interest to do something that we can host on our farm, we're always open to it. We had a pasture walk. We in extension we just call them pasture walks. So I do either pasture walks or woods walks, depending on whether I have my forester hat or my farmer hat on. But a friend of mine, Troy Bishop from the National Grazing Lands Coalition, he's their new regional coordinator, and he called me up in November and said, "Hey, we're going to do a pasture walk at your farm in January." And I said, "Well, we've got a pretty good chance of it either being the blizzard of the decade or shin deep in mud, so you pick the date because we'll just make it work no matter what." So we picked January 11th, and we tried to actually market it pretty quietly because I was a little nervous that we'd get too many people to show up. Well, we had to close the registration for it. All of our events are free, by the way, because we just don't want that to be a filter. But we had 60 people registered 6 days before the pasture walk, so we kind of shut it down. But anybody that said, "Hey, I missed the registration, can I come?" It's always yes. More the merrier, come. And we had a huge turnout, a great turnout, and we had, in hindsight, really just about the best weather you could hope for. It was in the mid-20s and not too windy. It snowed an inch or two the night before, which helped cover up some of the mud and made everything look pretty. And we went out and walked around and kicked the tires on bale grazing for a couple hours, and everybody came in the big farmhouse for chili and something hot afterwards. And we had to kind of start, well, we didn't push anybody out the door, but at 2:00 after everybody had
AM or
no
okay.
We had to go to our 2-year-old grandson's birthday party, so we told everybody just basically they could hang out there, but everybody kind of followed us out the door. So we do several events like that a year, but that was the first we've done quite a while in the wintertime. We actually did an extended season grazing workshop. I also did that with Troy Bishop. He's a troublemaker back like 15 years ago, and it was to show people that they could still be grazing their cows in mid-December in our area, and that's something very unusual. And it also worked out like perfectly. So it's always nice when something ends up turning out the way you would have ideally liked it, but you never know when you do something on a farm.
So how do you define success on your farm?
I think, well, the quick and easy way is that you can see progress forward and not too much taking steps backwards, but I think that's just farming. And obviously you need to be able to figure out how to generate enough cash flow out of it to pay your bills. If you just keep digging the hole deeper and deeper, at some point you're not going to be able to get out of it. That's a very difficult thing, I think, for all of us as farmers, because it is so easy to go out there and keep signing paper and incurring debt. You can see the improvements, though, on our farm, and we know that we have made our farm better over the last 20 years through the cattle. The cattle are the centerpiece of everything that's happening on our farm, and I really know our farm would not be as pretty and as so I know our farm would not be as pretty and as productive and look the way that we think it should look today if we weren't out there with the cattle grazing.
I guess what's a message to the sponsors and the people that make up ESAP? What's a message you have for them?
I guess what I would tell, any beef cattle farmer today is don't ever rest on your laurels. Don't be, there's always something that we could do out there that is going to be better for the land and better for our animals and better for us as farmers. And farming, I don't care what kind of farming it is a labor of love. That doesn't mean that it should be hard all the time or stressful all the time, but I think about what we've invested financially, emotionally, time-wise on our farm in Watkins Glen, New York, as well as our ranch in Argentina. And if we're not creating something for the next generation in our family, and we're fortunate because we have children and grandchildren. Not all farmers have somebody that they can hand it on to, but they should see that unknown person is the next steward of that land. I think that's what really should drive us all, is like, how can we not just hang on to or basically keep things from falling apart, but how can we really use our considerable skills and talents as farmers and these amazing animals that are out there every day, like basically happy working for their food, and use that to improve the land.
Well, very well said, Brett Chedzoy. And I tell you what, I appreciate you sharing more about your background. Did I say your last name right?
Yes.
Maria was laughing. I didn't know if I got it wrong there.
Maria laughs all the time, but it's because of things I say, not that you say.
But I appreciate you sitting down, and I just love learning about people's operations in different parts of the nation or the world, in fact, with the operation down in Argentina. But thank you for joining us, and congrats on that Region I recognition with ESAP.
Thank you very much, Lane.
All right, friends. Thank you for joining us for this great conversation here today. I hope you learned something new and learn more about all these conversations and more. Check out the podcast and subscribe if you've not done so. And I just want to sign off for today. I'm Lane Nordland. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to NCBA's Cattleman's Call podcast with Lane Nordland. For more information, visit ncba.org and make sure to subscribe to the podcast today.